I mean, like,
Yeah.
we both have a very valid reason to leave Ethiopia, but it's completely different. So I'm just gonna speak mine, and then I'm sure also Gobezlich can speak his also. My main reason is because of my activism work. My security was compromised. Like, as a queer person, I've always been, like, my security was always compromised from the societal point of view, and then also family and neighborhood and all that thing. But because of my activism work that I started back in 2013, the government, as you know, the Ethiopian government is very notorious on surveilling on people. So me and my collective were being civil. Like, there was a lot of government threat coming from our way. My house that I used to live with my fellow activists was ransacked multiple times. And then also the time was also at the end of 2016, where Ethiopia was under a state of emergency. And that means the police and law enforcement have a blank check to do whatever they want. So during that time, within 1 month, our security really got caused. So it became for me to stay in Ethiopia, potentially die, or get outside of Ethiopia and continue to be vocal in a different. So I choose to go outside of Ethiopia and be vocal. So that's the main reason that I left.
Mine is a little bit different experience in a sense that I did not felt safe enough to stay in Ethiopia, but there was an immediate threat coming from the government, specifically like the experience they shared with us. But I mean, when I came to Europe, at the time I came to Europe, there was house parties were being raided, people were receiving threats, and it was like, and the level of homophobia, like, you hear from friends, family members, and it was really uncomfortable to sane, with the have a healthy mental attitudes and stay in Ethiopia was becoming cool. So by the time I left Ethiopia, things were out of control. People were like, even the issue with HIV/AIDS was like in Ethiopia within the gay community. So like, I mean, there was nobody was addressing the issue. A lot of people were getting infected HIV and nobody was treating them. So that there is like constant existential threat coming, be it in your mental health, your physical health, and the safety as well, being compromised by everyone. And I came to Europe. I was looking back at what's going on in Ethiopia, and I felt that it was not worth it going back. I came for another reason, but I decided that it was not worth going back to. So I.
Well, that's a very tricky question because, to answer such kind of questions, we need to have a census, right? Like, properly researched and studied information has to be provided. For instance, when we say the Ethiopian population is 110, there is a proper and invested and also studied census that count that population. In the state that we're living, in a state that is criminalizing us for being queer, there is no such kind of studies. We haven't able to also as a movement, as also the majority of the time we're trying to leverage our own resources and then become our own savior, and we haven't done a baseline population count of queerness. But I can say based on the international census, which is 10% of the populations of any country is believed to be queer. So I would say 10% of Ethiopian populations. I would go with that. But there is no such study. And then the fact that there is no such studies also goes into what we're trying to do, which is to advocate for our right in a space that we are being prosecuted and criminalized and killed and also discriminated from all sorts of services that the country provide. Such kind of questions goes into the struggle that we.
Okay. How about the Gobel's religion? Do you want to say anything about it?
I mean, I've seen some research done with regards to HIV/AIDS. There was some research to see how many
You
people
mean
engaged.
about Ethiopia?
Yeah, engaged. How many? Like there was, they were. I have seen, because I did some very small research when I was in the university, and I've seen other people have done similar researches about. They were trying to find out the transmission of HIV/AIDS within the same relationships, and they were trying to find out how many people engage in same-sex sexual activities within the same sex. And it seems like the patterns are pretty clear within, like, in general, it doesn't matter how big the society is, how small the society is, be it in the west or in the east, you find some similar patterns of the number of, in terms of proportion of the number of who are engaged in sexual relationship, be it romantic relationship. It's not that different. So it doesn't matter how small it is, it doesn't matter how big it is, the pattern is pretty clear and pretty the same. And I doubt it would be any different as well. So there is, of course, the problem is like putting out a number. The problem is it kind of creates like a moral panic that it's increasing, like number of gay people are increasing and so forth. But it's the same throughout the world. It's the same. It could be in New York City and it could be a small village in Ethiopia. It's the same. There is no difference. Of course,
ratio-wise.
Yeah, level of awareness is different. Like people, for example, may feel guilty for having those feelings if you go to in a small village in Ethiopia, and if you go to a New York City, like New York City, of course, people will embrace that part of their self identity. That will be different. But number of, like, there have been like very particular research done like in the United States a very long time ago, and the pattern is the same. People who identify themselves, for example, as heterosexual and still engaged in same-sex relationships are the same in modern times as well. Like I think the research was done in 90 or 70, like that. So it just, the numbers are always the same. It doesn't change.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's.
Everything. Everything is difficult because it's like, the queer phobia in Ethiopia, what it does to you is dehumanize you. That means, like, it goes into everything. Like, oftentimes when we talked about, or like when we advocate for our rights, people, like, try to tend to say, like, oh, we have war, for instance. Now we have a famine that we need to take care of. We have poverties and this and all of that. But like people fail to understand is, like, in all of these atrocities and in all of these problems, we are the bottom of, because we're not even being recognized as a human being, and that goes into all of that. So when we talk about our rights, our advocations is about, like, access to education, access to health, access to participate in the socio-economic of Ethiopia, access to be productive, access to to be a human. So to answer your questions, like, how is it to live in Ethiopia is as a queer person, it's it denies all of this. So I grew up feeling that I'm not enough. My self-esteem was tarnished by it. How I see myself is really affected by it. And say hello to Mike. He decided to park his ass right in my camera. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
it goes into all of these basic questions. So, like, it was very difficult for me to, like, I have a different experience. Kovaslich has a different experience, but, like, our collective experience would be is, like, oftentimes, all the time, we have to think and rethink about our securities, how we see ourselves, how our parents, our siblings, our friends in school, in working places see us, how we walk on the streets, whether that street is safe for us or not, how we go to these public spaces, be it restaurant, club, or cafe, or any public spaces. And, like, it's really true, because our access to health is blocked by discrimination of queer phobia. And what it does to us is, like, it creates this anxiety to access health. So the majority of us have a very anxiety even to be tested for HIV to know our status ahead of. If we have HIV, whether we're going to be treated with dignity in the hospital or not is still a question. So it goes into a lot of issues related to being human. And I think that is also one of the point what people miss when we talk about queer right. When we say queer right is a human right, people tend to sexualize, but it's not about the sexual aspect of it. Rather how we are boxed as a human being by a insignificant part of who we are. No.
Still,
Because it's also, that's also the like when we talk about safe, it's such an elusive word. We really need to analyze it and see it how it is. But like for instance, like now in Austria, I'm not worried about whether I'm going to be killed by the government because of my sexual orientations and my gender identities and expression. But there are so many issues. I'm a Black refugee from Africa who is queer, living in a white space, and that is a complicated space to be. There is a layered and after layered of discriminations that I am still facing. So I wouldn't say I'm safe, but like if we are comparing and contrasting, I am safer than I was in Ethiopia. It's because I'm here that I am doing all my work. It's because I'm here that I'm showing my face to and recording this. If it was in Ethiopia, even if I want to, I wouldn't, because it's not safe for me. It would be a foolish thing for me to do. Bobas is still living in Europe and he can't show his face because still there is a precautions that he's going to face for doing that. And what I'm doing is still considered brave because, I'm still showing my face. In Europe, there are so many diasporas Ethiopians who are still under discriminations and under a lot of burden because of who they are. So yeah, it is such a complex thing to talk about safe.